Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed, and today we're continuing our Space Marines chapters videos by having a look at the Legion of the Damned. Now, a lot of people have requested this chapter, and some may be confused as to who they actually are. Now, the Legion of the Damned are not a specific chapter. They are actually a force of Adeptus Astartes who don't fall within the Imperial command structure, and most people in the Imperium would think them more a myth or a legend rather than an actual fighting force. Now, what I'll do today is just go through a bit of their history and their background, because unfortunately there's not as much lore surrounding them as there really should be, but we'll look at that in a bit more detail later on. Now, the Legion of the Damned is recognisable by their black battle plate with flaming details, along with other detailing in bone, and a lot of their iconography reflects skulls or skull shapes. Now, their battle cry is nothing, because they actually go to war in complete silence. No noise is ever heard from them other than the firing of the bolters and the sound of their other weapons. Now, they appear as ghostly and insubstantial when on the battlefield, and usually appear when Imperial forces are in great need, arriving from nowhere and leaving just as suddenly, not ever having said a single word. Now, their origins are officially shrouded in mystery in the Imperium, although some link them to the long-lost Firehawks chapter, which I will explain in greater detail later on. Now, the Legion itself has been infected by a condition which erodes their minds and withers their bodies, but it also gives them immense strength. Every member is on the road to an inglorious and insane death as their body and mind is slowly corrupted, and although combat accelerates their condition towards a berserker fury, they seek to continue their fight for the Imperium. Now, just to go into their organisation very quickly, they're actually without any formal organisation. They all consider each other equals, and their primary tactic is to literally flatten the enemy, then leave as quickly as they have arrived. Now, they operate unusually, as they do not report to any member of the Imperial High Command, as I've already said. However, their condition also increases their psychic senses, which has led for them to actually take cues for their operations from the Emperor's Tarot, which is a method of predicting the future used by psychers in the Imperium. Now, because of their heightened psychic abilities, it means that the Legion of the Damned can actually go where they are needed most, and it is renowned for them to appear just in a nick of time to save an Imperial force before departing from the scene. Now, their history, as I've said, is a little bit insubstantial, but there is a lot of evidence which links them to the Firehawks. The history of the Firehawks is that they actually were founded during the Age of Apostasy, during the reign of Gorge Vandire, and they actually took part in the Second Siege of Terra, where they helped liberate the Imperium from Gorge Vandire's tyrannical reign, and allowed the High Lords of Terra to be restored to their rightful place. Now, after that, they served with great distinction until the year 963 of Millennium 41, where they were sent to the Crow's World subsector to fight against Elder Pirates. Their entire chapter, including the chapter's mobile space fortress, Rapturous Rex, made a successful warp jump from the Piraeus system 120 light-years to the Crow's World. Their journey was meant to take 12 hours, but the fleet never arrived. 20 years after the event, the chapter was officially declared lost in the warp, and they were presumed to have been destroyed by the entities that exist there. The bell of lost souls on Terra rang 1,000 times to honour the loss of so many honourable Marines. Now, in the year 986 of Millennium 41, a routine Imperial patrol passed through the Orc-held system of Jakor Tal. Now, they found the Orcs had been completely destroyed, and there was no explanation as to how that had actually happened. This began to happen in other systems, with the enemies of the Imperium being completely destroyed without any evidence of an Imperial force ever being on the planet, and this continued for over a year. Then, a patrol ship in the Maran subsector narrowly avoided a collision with a spacecraft at the Sift jump point. Now, the patrol ship was entering the Sift system from the jump point, whereas the unidentified craft was actually leaving. After the ship had actually left, the patrol found 2 long cylinders left behind, which turned out to be unadorned coffins. Now, the coffins were shipped back to Terra and opened by the Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, the coffins themselves were identified as belonging to the Absolute, one of the spacecraft that vanished with the Firehawks fleet. Inside were the armoured remains of 2 Space Marines. The heraldry was not on record, but the serial numbers from the coffins and the armour tallied with equipment issued to the Firehawks. Unfortunately, their bodies were in such an advanced state of decay that actually IDing them was impossible. Now, a year later, an Imperial planet was under siege by a vast horde of Orcs. However, relief suddenly arrived in the form of several hundred black armoured Astartes that arrived without warning and departed just as quickly. This time they left behind a banner, a gnarled chapter flag of the Firehawks, and inscribed upon it was the motto In dedicato imperiatum ultra articulo mortis, for the Emperor beyond the point of death. Now, just to step out of the lore very quickly, that doesn't actually mean that in Latin. Now, we know that Imperial High Gothic is not the same as Latin. However, if you wanted to make it accurate to a Latin phrase, the phrase would actually read, In dedicato imperator ultra articulo mortis, which actually means, for the Emperor beyond the point of death. I believe the original phrase actually means, to our orders beyond the point of death, which could actually tally, but I think for the Emperor does sound a little bit better. As well as a banner, there was actually a data recorder and sundry other sealed items, which were all also shipped back to Terra. The next known contact with the chapter was on the cemetery world of Ceturus Minor, where they showed up just before the Holocaust Blood Crusade attained its ultimate victory, swiftly annihilating the entire Blood Crusade and leaving no enemy survivors. Now, the system defense ships in orbit report that shortly before the unexpected reinforcement arrived, a vessel resembling a starfort appeared in the system and began systematically obliterating the Chaos Armada. Now, this could be the Rapturus Rex, which was the mobile space fortress of the Firehawks. However, there was no identification given, and the chapter left soon after that. Now, there have been a host of other smaller conflicts with the Legion of the Damned at this time. However, I won't go through every individual one because a lot of them are actually quite old lore and we're not too sure how accurate they are in the current universe. Now, some of you will be wondering, what were those sundry items that were left behind on that Imperial world? Well, actually, the data recorder was decoded, and it was found to reveal the Firehawk's fate, which probably confirms the Legion of the Damned are actually descendants of the Firehawks. Now, what the recorder revealed was that when the fleet was making its warp jump, a storm sprung up and actually destroyed most of the fleet, with only one craft surviving. By using a daring warp exit maneuver, the craft left warp space, emerging far into the galactic east and thousands of light years off course, beyond the light of even the Astronomicon. Only 200 of the Firehawk's brethren survived the storm. All their gene seed had been lost, all their initiates and mortal crew were killed, and most of the chapter's command had been lost with the ships that were destroyed. To make matters worse, the brethren had changed. This change became more obvious over the next few months. Their skin began to blacken and blister, flesh began to fester and putrefy, and slowly the Marines began to decay alive. Now, it's clear that the Marines had been exposed to some sort of unexplained and incurable infection, which continued to devour them in the many years it took to return to the Imperium. As you may expect, those who returned to the Imperium were no longer sane. Pain and despair had actually driven them beyond the point of rationality. Now, they wished for death, release from their malady. However, they were still loyal Marines of the Emperor, and they would die to defend his realm. So began their war, with a new heraldry under a new name that most befitted their fate. All their ranks were removed, and all brothers were made equal before death, for surely now they were the Legion of the Damned. Now, that's everything I wanted to say on the Legion of the Damned. There's not much more lore out there. Now, there are a few other bits and pieces, but not anything that really gives weight to the fate of this chapter. Now, if you'd like a little bit more in-depth on the Firehawks, do let me know. But other than that, that's everything I wanted to say on the Legion of the Damned today. Don't forget to vote in the comments below for your next chapter. I think it's currently standing between the Raven Guard, the Iron Hands, and the Ultramarines, so do keep voting, and we'll see you next time on the Vaults of Terra.